No one expected a canine training mission to become a life or math rescue. But that's exactly what happened the day a team of German Shepherds discovered a forest ranger chained to a tree in the middle of a snowstorm. And what they did next would leave even hardened officers in tears. The snow had been falling since dawn, thick and relentless, blanketing the Bitter Creek National Reserve in silence. In the far eastern ridge of the forest, a canine training exercise was underway, routine, precise. Until it wasn't. The team had just crested a slope when a sudden whiteout swept through the trees, turning the world into a blur of swirling frost. Visibility dropped in seconds. Rachel Vance, the lead canine handler, called out to her unit, her voice barely cutting through the wind. Then she realized something was wrong. The dogs were gone. She scanned the area. No tracks, no movement, only ghostly gusts sweeping through branches heavy with snow. Panic rose in her chest, but she trusted them. These weren't just dogs. They were soldiers, trained with discipline and instinct honed razor sharp. If they had broken formation, there had to be a reason. And there was. Guided by something deeper than training, the pack, led by Valor, the scarred, stoic German Shepherd, moved quietly through the dense timber. His gait was steady, low to the ground, nostrils flaring with every breath of frigid air. The others followed in tight formation. Then he stopped. There, partially obscured by ice-laden branches, was a figure slumped against a gnarled pine. Blood stained the snow beneath. Heavy chains wrapped around the man's chest and wrists, locking him to the tree like a broken statue. It was Thomas Grady, 42 years old, 20 years in the Forest Service. And he was dying. Valor stepped closer, sniffed the air, and sat rigid, protective, never taking his eyes off the man. Snow fell in slow, soundless flakes around them. Help was still miles away, but Valor didn't wait. Thomas Grady's breath came in short, ragged bursts, each inhale slicing through his lungs like broken glass. The freezing wind clawed at his face, where dried blood from a gash on his temple had frozen into a sharp black line across his cheek. The chains binding him to the tree had long since stopped hurting. They had numbed into something worse. Silence. His fingers, blue and stiff, had no more fight left in them. 2 days, maybe more. It was hard to tell anymore. He could still remember their voices, muffled, angry, hidden behind ski masks. They hadn't wanted to hurt him, not at first. They'd wanted access. Remote zones of the reserve, untouched forest, land that could be exploited without oversight, illegal hunting, logging, maybe worse. But Thomas had said no. He always said no. He had a badge, a code, and 20 years of loyalty to this land. So they made an example out of him. They beat him, dragged him deep into the reserve, far from trails, campsites, or any chance of rescue, and chained him to the tree. "You disappear, no one asks questions," one of them had said before vanishing into the snow. And they were right. No one was coming. His head lolled forward, eyelids heavy as stone. He'd stopped feeling his legs hours ago. Even the fear had dulled. He was fading, his body giving in, his mind already halfway gone. But just as the world slipped further into white, a sound stirred the silence. Soft, rhythmic, snow being broken under paws. Thomas tried to lift his head. Was it wolves? His vision swam, but he saw them, shadows moving through the snow, purposeful and quiet. Then one stepped forward. Not a wolf, a dog. They came out of the trees like shadows. 5 figures moving low against the snow, coats dusted in white, eyes glowing gold in the fading light. For a brief, terrified moment, Thomas thought they were wolves. His instincts screamed for stillness, for silence, but his body was too far gone to move. Then one of them stepped forward, a German Shepherd, broad-shouldered, muscular, his dark coat streaked with a line of white from the snowfall, and a scar slashing across his left eye. He was beautiful, fierce, and calm. And somehow, he saw Thomas, not as prey, not as threat, but as something else entirely. The shepherd didn't bark. He didn't growl. He sat, right in front of Thomas. Back straight, chest forward, eyes locked. like a statue made of duty. Thomas blinked, not sure if this was real or another hallucination, but then the others began to move. One sniffed the air, then lowered its head to the snow, circling the base of the tree. Another began digging, paws flinging snow and ice until cold metal clinked beneath the chain's padlock. A third dog raised its head and let out a short, sharp bark into the sky, a signal, a call. They weren't lost, they weren't strays, they were trained. Tears welled at the corners of Thomas's eyes, half from the wind, half from something deeper. He tried to speak but only managed a cracked whisper. "Good boys." The lead dog, Valor, stepped closer. He sniffed the chain and barked once, a sound that echoed like a command through the forest. And then they got to work. No panic, no hesitation. Just purpose. Thomas closed his eyes, surrendering to the cold. But for the first time in days, he didn't feel alone. The last thing Thomas remembered before blacking out was the sound of barking, measured, intentional, not panicked. Then came the thud of paws against snow, the low growl of urgency in the air. He drifted in and out, caught between the biting cold and the strange comfort of knowing something, someone, was trying to save him. Help arrived not long after. Voices, footsteps, flashlights cutting through the white haze, then a shout, "I see him over here!" Rachel Vance, her cheeks windburned and eyes wide, rushed to his side alongside two deputies. She knelt beside him, barely able to believe what she was seeing. "Thomas? Ranger Grady?" she called out. He couldn't answer, but his lips moved. The dogs had done it. They had led them straight to him, miles off course from the training zone, not to the checkpoint, but to the man buried in ice and silence. They cut the chains, wrapped him in thermal blankets, and pulled him onto a sled. Valor didn't leave his side, even when the others tried to call him away. He stood guard, tail stiff, eyes scanning the trees until they were halfway back to base. By the time Thomas regained consciousness, he was lying in the infirmary of the ranger station, wrapped in warm sheets, the antiseptic air heavy and sharp. Every part of his body ached, his ribs, his wrists, his legs, but he was alive. A nurse leaned in. "You're safe now," she whispered. His voice was hoarse. "The dogs. Where are the dogs?" She smiled softly, almost in disbelief. "They're right outside. Especially the big one. He hasn't moved a single inch from your door since the second we brought you in. It's like he knows he belongs with you." Later that day, Rachel appeared beside him with a look he couldn't quite read, relief mixed with awe. "Valor chose you," she said softly. "He's never done that before, not since his partner died overseas. But something changed when he found you." Thomas turned his head slowly, eyes drifting toward the door. He wasn't sure what had happened out there, but he knew one thing for certain. That dog had saved his life. The warmth of the infirmary did little to settle the cold knot in Thomas's chest. As his body healed, his mind grew sharper, and with it came questions. Too many. Why that tree? Why that sector? Why wasn't he found sooner? Rachel returned the next morning, a folder tucked under her arm. Her expression was different this time, less relief, more concern. "I've been going through the logs," she said, settling into the chair beside his bed. "Something's off." She opened the folder and handed him a single sheet. It was a land access permit, stamped, dated, signed by him. Except Thomas had never approved it. He stared at the signature. It was close, nearly perfect, but it wasn't his. "This gave temporary clearance to a contractor named Jack Melton," Rachel explained, "to access Sector 12. Claimed it was for equipment maintenance, but that area hasn't been active in years." "No one's supposed to be in that zone," Thomas muttered, the weight of realization setting in. "No trails, no patrols, no surveillance." "Exactly," Rachel said. "It's where someone would leave a body if they didn't want it found." Thomas's jaw clenched. "So, this was planned, deliberate." She nodded. "And whoever did this had access to internal clearance. Someone forged your name and someone knew that Sector would buy them time." A slow breath escaped Thomas's lungs. He had been left there to die. and someone inside had helped make it happen. Outside, through the narrow window, Valor sat under the snow-draped eaves of the station, still as stone, eyes scanning the tree line like he knew something or someone was still watching. Thomas couldn't explain it, but a voice deep in his gut whispered the same thing. This wasn't over. The ranger station had never felt so quiet. Snow continued falling outside in soft, rhythmic waves. But inside, something had shifted. Deputies whispered behind closed doors. Rachel hadn't left the communications room, and Thomas, still wrapped in bandages, sat on a bench near the side window, eyes trained on the tree line. Valor lay at his feet, still and watchful, not asleep, never asleep. Thomas's thoughts churned. Someone had forged his signature. Someone had left him to die, and now someone had come back. Then came the sound. A faint metallic clink. Thomas froze. Valor's head snapped up. Another sound, closer, metal scraping metal, followed by a sudden sharp bang from the rear of the station. Rachel appeared in the hallway, flashlight already in hand. "Did you hear that?" Thomas nodded, reaching instinctively for the old fire axe hanging on the wall. "Garage door," he muttered. "South side." Before they could react further, the power cut out. Darkness swallowed the station. Baylor growled. Deep, low, primal. "Stay here," Rachel said, stepping toward the door. But Valor blocked her path, ears pinned, stance rigid. "He doesn't want you to go alone," Thomas said quietly. Through the side window, a shadow darted past, just a flash too quick to identify. Then, breaking glass. "South entrance." Rachel raised her radio. "We've got an intruder, south wing, requesting backup now." Another bang echoed down the hallway. "Closer." Thomas didn't wait. He moved fast, pain be damned, with Valor leading the way, head low, muscles coiled, every step calculated. Rachel followed, weapon drawn, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. Down the corridor, past the mess hall. They stopped in front of the generator room. A breath, silence. Thomas raised the axe. "I'll move," he whispered, "and everything changes." Then he kicked the door open. What followed was a blur of adrenaline and instinct, shouting, scuffling, the sharp bark of Valor as he launched forward. The attacker was subdued, but not before leaving behind more questions than answers. When the dust finally settled and the station lights flickered back on, silence returned, but it wasn't peace. It was the heavy kind, the kind that sinks into your bones and tells you this isn't over. The aftermath of the attack left the station rattled. One intruder had been caught, injured and cuffed, now silent in a locked room. He had refused to speak, but his final words echoed in Thomas's mind. "You think he was acting alone?" That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. Neither could Valor, who paced the hallway like a ghost, tail low, ears alert. Sometime past midnight, Thomas stepped outside into the snow-covered silence. The cold bit into his healing skin, but he welcomed it. The air was too still, too quiet. A different kind of storm was coming. And then he saw him. Sheriff Dalton, standing near the north perimeter of the compound, arms folded, facing the forest like he belonged to it. Thomas approached slowly, each step crunching in the snow. "Couldn't sleep either?" Dalton turned, forced a smile. "Something like that." For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Dalton sighed, eyes distant. "Funny, isn't it? We've both given our lives to this land, but the real danger wasn't out there." He nodded toward the forest. "It was always in here." Thomas's breath slowed. "Say what you need to say." Dalton hesitated, then spoke. Quiet, steady. "They offered money, nothing big at first, just to look the other way. A permit here, a fake report there. It was easy, until you started asking questions, started digging into the things I buried." Thomas clenched his jaw. "You forged my signature. You gave them the location." "I didn't think they'd take it that far," Dalton murmured, eyes heavy with something like regret, but not quite. "The chains. That was never supposed to happen. You were just supposed to get the message. Just disappear, not die." "You left me there," Thomas said, voice hard. "You betrayed your oath. You betrayed me." Dalton's hand drifted toward his belt. Too slow. Baylor lunged, slamming into Dalton with the weight of 100 pounds of trained fury. The sheriff hit the ground hard, breath knocked from his lungs. Thomas didn't stop the dog. When Rachel and the deputies came running moments later, they found Dalton pinned, face to the snow, not struggling, just defeated. Thomas stood over him, breathing hard. "You don't get to hide behind your badge anymore." And in that moment, the forest was quiet again. But it wasn't peace. It was justice. The chaos hadn't ended with Dalton's arrest. One of his remaining loyalists, Deputy Mark Howie, had gone dark during the investigation. Days later, while searching a remote patrol cabin flagged in the falsified logs, Thomas and Rachel found him. He didn't come quietly. A single gunshot shattered the silence. It wasn't meant for Rachel or Thomas. It struck Valor. The shepherd dropped instantly, a cry of pain tearing from his throat as he collapsed onto the snowy floor. Thomas dove to him, heart pounding, hands trembling as he pressed against the bleeding wound. "Stay with me, buddy," he whispered. "Not like this. Not after everything." Rachel apprehended Howie within seconds. His smirk didn't last long. Valor was rushed to the State Canine Trauma Center, sirens wailing through the icy mountain roads. The vets worked through the night. The bullet had missed his vital organs, but barely. Thomas never left his side. The story exploded across the state within hours. Major left for dead rescued by K9 unit. Dog that saved a life then took a bullet. Loyalty on 4 legs. Cameras flashed, reporters called. But Thomas ignored them all. He stayed at Valor's bedside, hand resting gently on the dog's bandaged side, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing. Days later, Valor opened his eyes again, slow, tired, but clear. His tail thumped once. Thomas let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and smiled through the tears. "You're coming home, partner." That was all that mattered. In a world full of betrayal and shadows, this was one truth that still held. Loyalty doesn't ask questions, it just stays. Spring came slowly to Bitter Creek. The snow receded in cautious steps, revealing a forest still scarred by what had happened, but not broken. Neither was Thomas. He stood at the edge of the station grounds, watching the tree line as Valor sat quietly beside him, a light limp in his front leg, but otherwise strong. Proud, ready. Rachel approached, an envelope in hand. "They offered you a transfer," she said. "Desk job, full benefits, quiet life." Thomas didn't even look at it. "I don't belong behind a desk." She smiled. "Didn't think you'd say yes. Good thing I brought a second envelope." Inside was a crisp file. Echo Division K9 Tactical Unit, lead, Thomas Grady, primary K9, Valor. "Are you sure he's ready?" Thomas asked. Rachel looked at the shepherd who hadn't left Thomas's side since the day they met. "He never needed to be trained to protect you, he just did." Thomas knelt beside Valor, running a hand along his thick fur. "What do you say, partner?" Valor let out a quiet bark, not loud, but firm, the kind that said yes. That morning, they suited up for their first patrol as an official team. And as they disappeared into the forest together, side by side, one step at a time, there was no fanfare, no applause, just the sound of snow melting and a bond stronger than any chain. Because sometimes, the ones we think need saving are the very souls that pull us back from the dark with nothing but loyalty and love.